have it open at Romans chapter 12, and we're going to be looking at from verse 9 onwards in particular. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we came back to looking at the book of Romans, I said that chapter 12 is like a hinge in the book. Everything about the gospel has been laid out in chapters 1 to 11, and it's all been about how God has graciously treated sinful people who deserve nothing but his wrath, and he's made them his family. And then chapters 12 onwards tell us, okay, because God has done that for you, what are you supposed to live like? And as we go through the passage tonight, and specifically verses 9 to 21, we're taken to thinking about what our relationships should be like with people. That as a growing Christian community, it's not simply about getting people to fill up chairs, it's about people being transformed into who they're supposed to be. That we might count people, but we want to see growth in character as well. It goes on, not just in numbers, but it goes on in our hearts and it goes on in our minds. That actually, if we don't become the people who we are supposed to be as followers of Jesus, then we're never going to do and be what he wants us to do and be. So, what I want us to do as we begin is glance over verses 9 to 21. So have a look at them and look at these list of commands that are there, and let's look at what our immediate reaction is to some of these, whether they feel easier or a bit more difficult. So start at verse 9. Love must be sincere. How do we feel about that? I mean, I read that and I think, yes, that's right. I want that. I want love to be sincere. I think we'd probably be all on the same page. Hate what is evil. Yes, I like that. I want to hate what's evil. Keep them coming, Paul. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another's above yourself. They all sound pretty positive so far, don't they? Things that we would really, really want to do. Never be lacking in zeal. Who wants to be lacking in zeal? I don't. Keep your spiritual fervour up. They're all coming to start with like an inspirational speech, which we should think, yes, this is what I want. And then we get the first wrinkle, or at least I think we get the first wrinkle. Be patient in affliction. Be patient in affliction. Okay. I want Paul to clarify that a little bit more. What do you mean by affliction exactly? What's that going to entail? And he would probably say anything that life can throw at you. So when you can see an end to it and when you can't, be patient in that kind of affliction. That can be stuff with your health, it can be hardship, it can be unjust treatment, it can be a friend turning from you. What Paul is saying, when anything happens to you that is negative, you've got to be patient in it, even if you can't see the end. That's pretty difficult, isn't it? That's the first one I think that you think, I don't quite like that one so much. We're to be patient when we have no idea what God is doing. Absolutely no idea. Okay, maybe that one's just a blip. Maybe that was just a bad one that Paul chucked in for us. Let's pick it up again. He carries on. Be faithful in prayer. Share with those in need. Practice hospitality. Now, all of those things I think are pretty positive. Unless you're someone who never likes anyone coming in your house, these are all good things. It's kind of all inspirational again. And then what do we hit? Bless those who persecute you. That's suddenly not so comfortable again. I like blessing people who are nice to me. I'm not so keen on blessing people who persecute me. And it's not even saying just ignore it and try and get on with life. It's saying actually be positive. If someone is being just horrible to you, your response is supposed to be, I'm going to bless that person. And not bless them with the back of your hand. You're supposed to properly bless them. And then, for me at least, they seem to come in such a way that they don't feel positive very much at all. So verse 17, don't repay evil for evil. It's human nature to want to get back at people, isn't it? Verse 18, if it's possible, live at peace with everyone. And that doesn't mean just keeping your mouth shut. It means try and make your relationships with everyone you meet flourish. Even the most annoying people, try and make your relationships flourish. And then I think verse 20 Verse 20 in particular pummels us with we have to take positive action towards people who hurt us. So it says, if your enemy is hungry, doesn't say look on at a distance and enjoy their hunger. It says feed him. It says if your enemy is thirsty, and then it doesn't say pour yourself a cold one and drink in their suffering. It says, no, give him something to drink. That's really, really not easy. These are hard things to do. These are really hard things to do. And if we're going to be able to do these things, we have to be able to forgive. And that's what we're going to be thinking about tonight. What does it mean to forgive? Forgiveness can't just be a word that we say. It's got to be something that we live out. It's got to be something we live out event by event by event. And actually, right at the end of our reading, right at the end, is a little thinly veiled warning about just how important all this is. Because it could be we're thinking, maybe some of these I don't want to do. At the end of the reading, it says, when I turn over the page, and so I can see the end of the reading, it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. It's saying to us, if you don't do these things, evil just might overcome you. You might be shaped by the evil that happens to you in such a way that you never become who God wants you to be. Yeah, you might be saved, you might be going to heaven, but you won't be what he dreamt for you. You won't be that. So, that's what we're going to be thinking about this evening. How do we take these things and put them into practice? Because what we're going to see is that being a Christian should make a difference to us. We should become people who can start to live some of these things out. If we don't change over time, then really something has gone wrong somewhere. I've referred to it before, but Milton Jones, the comedian, has a book called 10-Second Sermons, and it has some nail-on-the-head moments where he just hits it. He can't draw, but he can make a point quite well. So he's got one cartoon that says this. It's got a person who's saying, I've been a Christian for 40 years. And the response is, how come you're still not very nice? And that's the challenge which is coming through in these verses. You can be a Christian for 40 years, but people might look at you and say, you're still not very nice. We wouldn't want that really, would we? That's not what I would want after 40 years of being a Christian for people to say about me. If we don't put into practice what we've had read for us here, if this isn't how Christians live, then what is at stake? There's a number of things. The Christian witness in the world is at stake. If we're not who we're supposed to be, people generally outside of church will look on the Christians and say, you know what? They're supposed to be a light to the world. They're not. But it's more than that. You are at stake as well. If you don't do or try to become the person that this chapter puts out before us, you're going to shrink. You might become consumed by bitterness. You might be, as verse 21 says, overcome by evil. So, there's some tough stuff in here. And one of the things that I've said that flows through it is the whole subject of forgiveness. And so for the rest of the time, we're going to think about what that might mean. What do we need to get in place so that we can forgive people, so that we can bless those who persecute us, so that we can feed our enemies? We're going to look at what we need to get in place to be able to do that. And to start with, we need to think about something. Anger and unforgiveness, they distort reality. They distort how we see people. They distort who we are. As a little bit of a silly example of how this works, earlier this year there was an app which had a little flourish of being on people's phones and pictures being posted on Facebook, where you could take a photo of yourself and it would age you to show you what you would look like in the future. It would also de-age you to show you what you looked like in the past. Now, this handsome chap up here is me, and what we can see from that is that I am my father's son. My future is not good. It's not good. So that's what, in theory, what I'm going to look like in 20 years' time. Every time I used this app, it reduced my hairline severely. I was not happy with that. But it wasn't just that you could make yourself look old. Do you want to see me in my youth as well, according to this app? So this is the boy band version of me. That's the face that I still think I have, but it's probably more there. You could do this with this app. It was a very good app. So that's my younger face. Now, you can probably tell where I'm going to go with this. Would you like to see what Lorna looked like? So that is an aged version. That's the aged version of Lorna. But then I thought, well, that's now a photo on my phone. I can age that one as well. And then I can take that one and I can age it again. Would you like to see what 3 times aged Lorna looks like? And you cannot tell her I did this. That's terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely terrifying. Now, why am I showing you these pictures? Why am I doing this? For this reason. When something goes wrong in our relationships, we tend to do something. We airbrush ourselves and we make the other person look like a hideous witch. That's what we do. We look at ourselves and we justify everything that we do, but we don't give the same allowance to the other person. So, you are complicated. The other person is one-dimensional. If you have someone lie to you, they are just a liar. If you lie, well, there were certain mitigating circumstances that need to be taken into account. This is what we do. We airbrush ourselves. We make the other person look incredibly bad. We do this. So when you've had an argument, and I know everyone does this, you replay the argument later. How does that play out? You are the righteous one standing up for what is true. You are good. The other person is just inconsiderate, incoherent. They're horrible, aren't they? That's at least how every argument I have plays out in my mind afterwards. That's how it works. You make the other person look bad, whereas you look good. Unforgiveness does that. You start to see yourself in ways that aren't true, and you start to see other people in ways that aren't true either. If you don't forgive people and you keep the unforgiveness just simmering away inside of you, you will turn people into looking like that, and don't tell Lorna I did it. That's what goes on in your heart. I know she's going to find out. One of you's going to tell, and I'll have to forgive you. She's not listening at home. So, where do we go with this? It's the thought that anger and unforgiveness are much more dangerous than we might think. They change us. Now, it might be that you think anger and unforgiveness is not that important. Actually, it is. Now, you all know that I like films. I love the Avengers films. And in one famous scene in one of their films, Bruce Banner, we all know Bruce Banner, don't we? The mild-mannered scientist. He can turn into the raging Hulk. All he's got to do is just got to get angry. And in this one particular film, with this huge thing coming towards the Avengers, Captain America says to him, Bruce, now might be a good time to get angry. And he reveals to them at this point in the film that he can do it whenever he wants. And he simply says, my secret is I'm always angry. It's a great scene, but that is not how life works. If you are always festering anger underneath you, you will not be a mild-mannered person. It will bleed out of you all over the place. It will poison your life. You will become imprisoned by it. You will get gradually more and more bitter. You won't be a mild-mannered person 1 minute. You will always be becoming the Hulk. So, how do we overcome evil with good? If evil can do really horrific stuff to us, what do we do with it? What's the antidote? Well, let's go back up to verse 14. Let's look there. Let's start there. Because there's a few things. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. And this is where our series on the Sermon on the Mount really connects with what we've been doing in Romans. We have to talk to we have to talk to God about people. And if there is someone who routinely makes your life difficult, you have to understand that if you don't talk to God about them, you will become more bitter about them. That's simply what will happen. You will slowly build up bitterness around you. If you talk to God about someone who's really, really upset you, it's difficult to stay mad and to want revenge. It really is. I mean, next time you're mad at someone, try it. Try talking to God about them for long and see if you can stay mad. Because you might start off by praying, Lord, would you just sort out that idiot? That might be your first prayer on the first day after they've wound you up. Just deal with them. But as you pray, and as you begin to reflect on what Jesus is like and what he's done for you, as you think about him saying, forgive others as I have forgiven you, in time your prayers will change for them. They might change from, Lord, would you deal with that idiot, to, Lord, that person is behaving like an idiot. They're making my life miserable. I know I need to forgive them. I can feel bitterness starting to stick to me, and I need you to remove it. Over time, you can't stay mad at someone if you're praying for them. If you're praying, parts of Romans like all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God are going to come buzzing into your mind at some point, and you're going to think, I'm a sinner as well. I get things wrong. And you'll start to change your opinion. They'll help you see that person not as an uglified version that you might have on an app on your phone, but as someone who's just as complex as you. Someone that you don't know everything about. And you'll start to grow in compassion for them if you talk to God about them. Praying for people brings them before God. And the spin-off is you begin to overcome the evil that was done to you. You overcome evil as you pray for them. Whereas the alternative is right there in verse 14. If you don't bless people, if you don't pray for them, you're going to curse them. You're going to curse them. Inside, if you're unforgiving towards someone, it's like you've got a little voodoo doll of them. And if you're continually feeding your unforgiveness, you are like someone sticking pins in them all the time. You will curse them every time you replay the event. Whatever they did to you, they did that to me, they're horrible, and you've just stuck a pin into them. At the same time as you do that, you're poisoning yourself. And if you don't talk to God about these people, you'll certainly talk to others about them. You'll certainly do that. You know, gossip is a way of cursing someone. It might not have some big supernatural power, but if you gossip about someone and you talk about them and you just embellish it just a little bit, that other person will take it on board and they'll see this person over here in a different way than when they first started the conversation. And we know when we're gossiping, don't we? You know when you're talking about someone and you get that little flash of enjoyment as you stick the knife in? That's gossip. When you do that, you're being overcome by evil. In a way, you have just cursed them. So we need to be people who seek to bless those who persecute us. At the same time, we've got to be patient in affliction, because it could be people are annoying for a very long time, and we have to be patient and pray for them for a very long time. We might pray and pray and pray and pray and not see God move within our time frame. We simply have to do that. Otherwise, evil will overcome us. So, first step is pray. What's the second one? Well, you've got to choose to forgive. So, verse 17, do not repay anyone for evil. Verse 19, don't take revenge. And this is where we have to grasp something about forgiveness that we don't always get. Forgiveness is a decision first and a feeling second. A decision first and a feeling second. So when Jesus talks about this subject in Mark chapter 11, and he's picturing someone praying in the temple, what he says is this: If you hold anything against anyone whilst you're giving your offering, forgive them, so that your Father may forgive your sins. What Jesus says in that moment is forgiveness is a decision that you make there and then. He doesn't say work towards forgiving them in time. He says right there at that moment, when you realize you've got something that you hold against another person, forgive them instantaneously. You might not feel it, but you choose to do it. That's what he's saying. And when you choose to forgive, there's certain things that you need to do in your mind. You have to make certain commitments about that person. You have to say, I'm not going to hurt them directly. I'm not going to do anything specifically to hurt them. I'm not going to ruin their reputation. So I'm not going to say anything to anyone that isn't true. I'm not going to do that. And the third one is perhaps the most difficult. If I'm going to forgive someone, I'm not going to keep replaying the event over and over and over again in my mind. I'm going to choose not to do that. If you don't do those things, you will be overcome by evil. It will seep back into you. Now, when I say these things, it doesn't mean if the offence is so big that you can't take legal action if necessary. So if someone breaks the law, you can forgive them, but you can want the legal process still to go through. You can do that. It doesn't mean that you can't ever warn someone else about someone who's just a bit toxic. You can do that. But it does mean that if you have that conversation, you've got to think about why you're doing it. Justice is okay. Vengeance and revenge are not. And out of those three things, it's probably the third one that's most difficult. We often can't turn our mind off and we replay things over and over and over again. Forgiveness is a decision you have to make often over and over and over again. You know, your mind is a great thing, but it can be a horrible thing as well. If something keeps coming back to you, maybe one of the things you have to do is you have to put into practice a verse in 2 Corinthians where it says, take captive every thought and make it subject to Christ. It might not have originally been used in that verse in that way, but I think Paul would say, if someone keeps coming to your mind that you need to forgive, you need to take that thought captive. And then there's a third thing. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. You have to give people what they need. If you're going to forgive people, you have to give people what they need. Now, notice that verse does not say you have to give people what they want. So, it's not saying you give that person who's hurt you the things that they want. You give them what they need. Sometimes, out of compassion, we give things to people that they want, and it doesn't do them any good at all. Give people what they need. That one was quick. And then the last one is this. Get out of the judge's seat. You have to let Jesus be judge. So verses 17 and 19, they tell us, leave the ultimate judging of people to Jesus. He says, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Any kind of payback for people, whatever it might be, you have to leave in the hands of God. It's his job, and he'll get it right. And there's two really good reasons for leaving judgment in the hands of God. First one is you are totally unqualified to judge anyone. Totally unqualified. God is going to do it one day, and he'll do it with absolute perfection. He will know everyone's history backwards. He'll know every glimmer of mitigating circumstances in every situation. He will know everything, and he will get his judgments completely right. I think it's fair to say we can't do that. As a father of 3 boys, I don't get my judgments with them right. They can pull the wool over my eyes brilliantly a lot of the time. God will never get it wrong. He'll get it right. And the second thing, as well as being totally unqualified, it's not your job. It's Jesus' job. It's his job to judge people. And just reflect on this for a minute. If he knows everything about everyone else, he knows it about you too. He knows all of the justifications you give to yourself when you let yourself off something. He knows when you're doing something wrong. He sees your depths, and he died for you. And I think we probably each know our own hearts better than anyone else's in the room. We should probably look at ourselves and say, I'm definitely not the one to judge people because I get so much wrong. Now, the things that I've said tonight are not easy. They're not easy at all. And part of the reason they're not easy is they involve really strong emotions. When someone hurts you, it is difficult to forgive them. It's difficult because it's not often a one-off decision to forgive. You have to keep doing it. And so what I'd like to do as we close and as we go into communion is I'd like to tell you a true story from the life of a lady called Corrie ten Boom. She was someone who was famous in World War II. She looked after Jews, and she was caught and she was put in a prison camp. And after the war, she would go around telling the people of Germany that God would still forgive them. And she recalls a story where she forgives an SS guard who was a guard at the concentration camp where her sister died. And the way she tells it, the things that are in this passage, they come out. And I just want to show them to you. I'm going to mostly read her words. And so if she can do it, we can do it too. This is what she says. It was a church in Munich that I saw him, a balding, heavy-set man in a grey overcoat, a brown felt hat clutched between his hands. It was 1947, and I had come from Holland to defeated Germany with the message that God forgives. It was the truth that they most needed to hear in that bitter, bombed-out land. And I gave them my favourite mental picture. When we confess our sins, I said, God casts them into the deepest ocean, gone forever. It was afterwards that I saw him, working his way forward against the crowd. One moment I saw the overcoat and the brown hat, the next a blue uniform, a visored cap with its skull and crossbones. It came back with a rush, the huge room with its harsh overhead lights, the pathetic pile of dresses and shoes in the centre of the floor, the shame of being forced to walk naked past this man. I could see my sister's frail form ahead of me, ribs sharp beneath her skin. Now he was in front of me, hand extended, a fine message. How good it is to know that, as you say, all our sins are at the bottom of the sea. And I, who had spoken so glibly of forgiveness, fumbled in my notebook rather than take that hand. I remembered him and the leather crop swinging from his belt, and my blood seemed to freeze. The man went on, you mentioned Ravensbrück in your talk, he said. I was a guard there. But since that time, I have become a Christian. I know that God has forgiven me for the cruel things I did there, but I would like to hear it from your lips as well. Will you forgive me? And I stood there. This is what she says. I, whose sins every day had to be forgiven, and I could not do it. My sister had died in that place. Could he now erase her slow, terrible death simply by asking? It could not have been many seconds that he stood there, hand held out, but to me it seemed hours as I wrestled with the most difficult thing I have ever had to do. And still I stood there with coldness clutching my heart. But forgiveness is not an emotion. I knew that too. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. She makes the decision. Jesus, help me, I prayed silently. I can't lift my hand. I can lift my hand. I can do that much. You supply the feeling. You supply the feeling. And so woodenly, mechanically, I thrust my hand into the one stretched out to me. And as I did, an incredible thing took place. The current started in my shoulder, raced down my arm, sprang into our joined hands, and then this healing warmth seemed to flood my whole being bringing tears to my eyes. "I forgive you, brother," I cried, with all my heart. For a long moment we grasped each other's hands, the former guard and the former prisoner. I had never known God's love so intensely as I did then. She chose to forgive. It wasn't easy. She didn't let evil overcome her. But when she writes this story, she goes on. And this is really, really important. "And having thus learned to forgive in the hardest of situations, I wish I could say I never again had difficulty in forgiving. I wish I could say that merciful and charitable thoughts just naturally flowed from me from then on, but they didn't." You would have thought that having forgiven the Nazi guard, forgiveness would be child's play. But it wasn't. There were times when I still seethed inside, but I had to go back and ask God again and again to work his miracle in me. That's what forgiveness is like. It's a decision, it's hard, but it stops you being overcome by evil. And what we're going to do now is we're going to share the Lord's Supper together. And that story that the lady tells of seeing the prison guard coming towards her with his hand outstretched saying, "Will you forgive me?" It's kind of replicated here. But do you know who you are in the story? You're the prison guard. And Jesus is the person who you're putting your hand out to. And when you say, "Will you forgive me?" he says yes every single time. There is no hesitation. He forgives you because he laid his life down for you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the most graphic demonstration we can of what forgiveness looks like. It's Jesus giving his life for you. So if you struggle to forgive someone, look here. Look at what he's done. And let this inspire you to forgive. Because in your own strength, you will never do it. But when you see what he's done for you, something should definitely rise inside of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to share bread. And once we've shared the bread round, we're going to pray. And then we're going to share the wine round. And we're going to sing. And we're going to leave here, hopefully, with a graphic reminder of how to overcome evil with good. So on the night Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it. And he said to the people who were there then, but also zipping across time to all of us in this room, he said, "This is my body broken for you." And he was broken. He was really broken. And so we just simply need now to accept the forgiveness that he offers. So I'm going to grab a couple of people. I'm going to grab Graham. Rupert, do you want to take the bread round? So take some bread, and as you take it, maybe think about you being the one going to Jesus saying, "Will you forgive me?"